Welcome to Crunch Times, the place to be to make the tangible connection between your business operation and its financial performance. Today, we are going to talk about strategic management, what it is and what is it good for. We are going to talk about some specific business failures when strategic management went wrong and how you can apply it in your own business. It doesn't matter if you are a startup, entrepreneur, or run a small business, the principles still apply. So stick around. Let's go. We are going to talk about what strategic management is, why it is super important, how can we implement it, and we are going to talk about real examples of business failure and how a strategic management could play a big part in making sure that the strategy is implemented properly and maybe guarantee the success of that initiative. The textbook definition of strategic management is the systematic analysis of an organization's internal and external environment that leads to the development of a definitive and intentional course of action. It's a mouthful, I know. So let's break it down and see if we can get to a more simplified definition. So, a strategic management is basically how companies achieve and retain competitive advantage. So, how can they do that? That's what we are curious about. There are three important questions that you need to ask yourself as a business owner in the organization, wherever you are. And those three important questions, we have seen them before when we were talking about goal settings and all those approaches. And those again applies in a strategic management. So where do you want to go or where they want to go if you're talking about a specific organization or initiative? How are you going to get there? And whether or not you are succeeding in achieving that. So why strategic management matters? Because it increases the speed of your decision making. If you go through those specific three questions that we just talked about, that let alone really speed up your decision making because you know where you are, you know where you are going to go if you're succeeding, and you know how you're going to get there. So you're super crystal clear about those steps, those questions. So it's going to be super easy to really make the decision. It also improves your employee engagement because now they are also invested in that vision, in the strategy, in the plan, and all that. It also making hiring decisions so much more easier because you already know what are the resources that you need, who are the exact people that you need in your organization or your business, and what are the roles within that they are going to fulfill. And it also creates interest in your company because everybody is now curious about what you do or how you are successful. So that's really important. So there are three specific phases when it comes to strategic management processes. The first one starts, of course, with planning. And from planning, we are going to turn into the execution phase. And after that, we are going to track and monitor progress. So if you look at it, these three phases of the process really corresponds to those three important questions that you needed to ask yourself, right? So let's dive into each of these phases. So in the planning phase, we are going to start with the goal setting. We are really going to get super crystal clear about the vision and what we are trying to achieve. And also in this phase, we are going to talk about and think about and plan around our key focus areas and probably establish three key focus areas. Otherwise, every area is going to be a focus. So we really need to make sure that we are super crystal clear in this step. Next, we are going to really analyze strategically. And how are we going to do that? We are going to look at the SWOT and PEST analysis. Briefly, SWOT is the strength, weaknesses, and opportunities and threat, which focuses mostly on the internal areas of the business. And PESTEL is a lot of factors outside of your organization, such as political, economical, society, as legal, outside of your organization that you have not much control over. And you are really curious to see how those elements are going to really impact your strategy and your organization. After that, we are going to really formulate our strategy because we have a vision, we know our focus areas, we know what we are good at and what we are lacking, and we also know how the external environment is going to impact our entire organization, the strategies that we are going to implement. So now it's time to come up with a detailed plan and really specify the projects that we are going to implement. It's also crucial to design a set of specific KPIs because that is going to really come in handy when we are in the third phase of looking at the progress and really measuring our success. So KPIs are our key performance indicators. For example, if the vision was for us to grow our revenue maybe by 50%, and we were really sure about the areas that we wanted to focus, for example, maybe customer service is one of those key areas, then our key performance indicator might be if our revenue growth or what's our customer success rate. Now we come to the execution phase, which is super exciting, right? We have all those plans and we really want to get to work and do all the things that we said we are gonna do. So the first one is start with the strategic governance. We really need to make sure we have defined the roles, who is doing what, because we want to have responsibility and also accountability on ourselves and also among our team. And also we need to establish the reporting. So if, for example, I'm doing specific tasks or really taking care of parts of the project, how am I reporting the progress of that project, for example? Or if the focus was to increase revenue, how are we measuring that? So we also establish those in here. We then make sure that we communicate our strategy to our team because then it's really important to also to have their buy-in and make sure they are on the same page and they know what we are doing. So then communication is key, and making sure that the strategy that we have chosen is really aligned and is in line with the culture of the organization. So for example, if our organization is really focused on collaboration, data privacy, a lot of those pieces. So, and then if that strategy has nothing to do with those cultures and sometimes go against it, so we may not have a lot of buy-in from our stakeholders. So really make sure that is aligned with your culture. And then you come to track, measure, and celebrate, right? So then in this phase, you are tracking your performance against those goals and objectives that you set in the first phase. If you remember, we talked about the vision, we talked about the plan, we talked about KPIs. So then here, we now implement those KPIs. We measure and report on our progress. And then we try to definitely utilize technology to our benefit, because if you're a big organization, it doesn't matter big or small, data and really processing data is key. So utilizing technology efficiently is perfect. And then we are going to do this all over again. So you might ask, now I know what a strategic management is, I know which questions should I ask myself, and I know all those phases. But what about the failures? You mentioned business failure. So I want to now talk about strategic management and all those failures that I mentioned. So the interesting statistics out there is that a strategy implementation is where 80% of strategic failures fall under. And some of those failures and mistakes that we make is communication is a big piece of it. So for example, in a lot of cases, the founder or the owner of the business, they really have a set of objectives, and it's really tough for them to communicate those set of objectives to their team members. So then when it comes to implementing those strategies is where things go sideways. The other mistake that we have seen is aligning strategy and culture, which I touched based on in the previous slide. Lack of accountability is another big one. So who is doing what? In some projects, For example, a manager thinks that the team members are kind of doing something, but then later on, he or she realizes that no one knew what they're doing, or they were not really clear about their responsibilities and objectives, so no one was accountable. That's also key for us to really make sure that we have a successful implementation. And poor data and poor reporting. So if we are doing all these great work and we don't really have the data to go back and see where things went well, where things didn't work, and learn from those. So now we want to move on to some of the examples and really understand how the strategic management and all those best practices fit within these business failures or strategy failures per se. So Toys R Us was a dominant toy retailer with a vast network of physical stores, and I'm sure you have come across one of these stores or even shopped multiple times. So the company faced increasing competition from online retailers such as Amazon and Walmart. And also, despite the shift towards the e-commerce and changing the retail landscape, Toys R Us didn't really invest enough in its online presence and its omni-channel strategy. They also carried a significant amount of debt, which really limited their option to invest in necessary improvements that they needed to. So the lack of a strategic adaptation to the changing retail environment, coupled with the financial burden of the debt that they were carrying, eventually led the company's bankruptcy in 2017. So then if you want to go back to those phases of a strategy implementation and management, a strategic management that we briefly talked about, you realize that in the implementation and the planning, I should probably start with the planning, they didn't really go through that pestle analysis and the SWOT analysis to really understand which area they need to invest in, what's the external environment is telling them, and then coming to the strategy implementation and the strategic management part of it, the execution of it, it went sideways. Another example here that I have is Cisco, but not the bankruptcy of Cisco because that has never happened. But one of the products that they put out there that which was this flip phone or camera. I don't even know what to like. It's a camera, right? So it's not a phone. So it had this, it was really bulky, right? And it was recording and it had this flash that you could put it into your computer and all those beautiful pieces. But what happened was Cisco implemented this strategy to really expand into new products and new markets because they wanted to grow and they were looking to grow their revenues. But that flip phone really was not successful because Cisco really tried to grow outside of its basic product line and then really expand into new products and market. And that strategy planning and implementation and execution of it was not really successful. And why was that? So I want to talk about business growth strategies for a little bit here. So when we are trying to grow a business, we really rely on this ANSOF matrix. So the ANSOF matrix tells us that if you're trying to grow the business, you start by looking at penetrating into the current market that you are. So starting with your current and existing products and operating in the existing market that you are. And then from there, the next easier one was either stick with your own product and expand into a new market. For example, expanding into new international markets, different country, or even new demographics. So if you are only, for example, selling to a younger generation, maybe middle age, so it depends which market you want to target. And then the next growth comes with your existing market, but maybe venturing in a new product. So you are basically still penetrating within that market and trying to address the needs of your consumer within that market, but with new product. So what Cisco did, they really jumped from all these and then they went into the last one, which is the diversification strategy. They came up with a new product into a completely new market. And that's where their business strategic management really failed to understand what the vision is and how they want to get there. So Schultz is a brewing company, or was a brewing company, and what they did, they had such a quality brand and such a quality product, but they were ambitious to grow the company and they were ambitious to grow their profitability. So they came up with this idea of changing their cost structure and running on a leaner cost model. That really sacrificed the quality of their product, and soon enough, they really lost their customer base. So again, if you go back to those phases of strategic management, really planning and being crystal clear on what they wanted, but then how are they going to get there and if they are succeeding was two big questions that they needed to ask themselves and really address those questions as well. So their cost cutting really didn't play out very well. In summary, a strategy accelerates time. You can really get to where you want to go faster, but you really need to understand what is involved, going through the phases, being super crystal clear about those questions, and really have the resources, the time, and the efficiency to execute and implement. Thank you so much for being here. Don't forget to subscribe. We love to talk to you about your business and your finances strategy. So we are here to support you. Until later, good luck.